Welcome to the 26th podcast episode of Inside the CFO's Office. This is a podcast where we go beyond the numbers. With today's leading finance professionals, I'm joined by Aaron. Aaron brings about a decade of experience across global organizations where he has led large-scale finance initiatives, helping business modernize their finance functions and drive more data-driven, efficient operations. The context for today's theme is RPA in FP&A, which is essentially about using software bots to automate repeated or rule-based tasks. What has shaped your perspective on today's modern?
My career spans the last 20 years. For the first 10 years, I spent a lot of time in corporate accounting for multiple large organizations such as GE, Worley, RPS, Rio Tinto. I built my careers in corporate finance, accounting, supply chain finance, manufacturing accounting, also FP&A. And that allowed me in the last 8 years transition to a senior global leadership position.
What were some of the defining moments that influenced you?
The robotic automation process can play a pivot role to prepare those reports for us more efficiently. As soon as the data is ready, in the past, we have limited data input from either our CRM, for example, like Salesforce, or from the economic market data, or large supplier or large customers CapEx spending. Together with internal data, we prepare the driver-based forecast. But we need to understand the model behind those forecasts to monitor the accuracy. FP&A will be elevated further to be a superman in the business partnership because FP&A now will have a lot of data insights.
How has FP&A evolved since the start of your journey, and what has changed?
FP&A at the start of my career is a traditional reporting, monthly reporting, variance analysis to budget forecast. You work with the business to identify the drivers, the momentum of the external factors, and also the drivers within the internal business factors to prepare the forecast. With technology, a lot of reporting part is automated through RPA, send out the report, prepare the report based on the rule you set in the robot. We have a lot of tools in the market leveraging RPA or intelligent process automation, IPA, or AI or machine learning.
Which are in FP&A processes are most suitable for automation? Where do you think teams underestimate its potential?
I see the standard reporting is good for RPA because it's rule-based, is repetitive, the transaction volumes are heavy, so they are very good for RPA, for example, send out the P&L report or KPI dashboard or preparing the monthly management report.
How can teams prioritize what to automate first?
You have the highest benefit, the lowest complexity. Because complexity is low, you can build a robot very quickly and then you can generate the highest benefits. So to prioritize, you have to think what the channels you want to use to build those robotic automation process.
How can someone transition from a traditional finance role into a more tech-enabled?
Be aware of what's happening around you, what's the latest technology, what's the latest tools out there, understand your current skill sets, and then also the future status, depending on where you want to be.
Hi everyone, I am Valeris Dikuna, Head of Business and Strategy at Finflow, and welcome to the 26th podcast episode of Inside the CFO's Office. At Finflow, we are closely working with finance leaders every day, and one thing is clear, the role of finance is evolving rapidly. This is a podcast where we go beyond the numbers and behind the scenes with today's leading finance professionals, exploring their journeys behind what shaped their careers, the challenges they have navigated, and the lessons that they have learned along the way. In today's episode, I'm joined by Aaron, a seasoned finance leader with deep experience in finance transformation and technology. Aaron brings about a decade of experience across global organizations where he has led large scale finance initiatives, helping business modernize their finance functions and drive more data driven, efficient operations. Aaron, welcome to the podcast today. It's great
Yeah,
to have you
thank
with
you for
us.
the introduction, Valerius. It's my pleasure to be here.
You're most welcome. So, for our audience, before we jump into Aaron's journey, let me quickly set the context for today's theme, that is RPA in FP&A. For those listening, RPA is a short form for robotic process automation, which is essentially about using software bots to automate repeated or rule based tasks, consolidation, report generation, reconciliations that finance teams have traditionally spent a lot of hours. What's interesting is that RPA isn't just about saving time, it's fundamentally changing how FP&A teams operate. By taking away manual work, it allows finance professionals to focus more on analysis, insights, and strategic decision making. That's exactly what we are going to explore today, how RPA is moving from being a back office efficiency tool to becoming a core enabler of modern intelligent finance. So here we are to kickstart off with the episode. Aaron, jumping into your journey, would you mind walking us through your finance leadership journey and what has shaped your perspective on today's
Okay,
modern
very
FP&A?
good. Thank you. My career spans in the last 20 years. So for the first 10 years, I spent a lot of time in corporate accounting, worked for multiple large organizations such as GE, Worley, RPS, Rio Tinto. In my first 10 years, I built my careers in corporate finance, accounting, supply chain finance, manufacturing accounting, also FP&A. And so that allowed me in the last 8 years transition to a senior global leadership position. In today's modern world, I see technology will play an important part in FP&A. But in my view, FP&A is a skill set. Technology is a tool. So technology, I see that as an enabler for us as FP&A professionals to do our jobs better in a higher standard. I will give you a couple of technology-led examples in FP&A. You mentioned the RPA. So in FP&A, we have a lot of reporting, and then those reportings are standardized reporting, and then can be, if they are rule-based, they are repetitive, the transaction volumes probably most of the time is high, right? So then the RPA will play a very important and efficient role in transform that reporting. In my leadership in the last 8 years in a global organization, I see what important is human capital. So we needed to change the way how we think, we interact with technology to do our work. The second is the cultural shift, right? So shift from more how we partner with the robot to do our work more efficiently.
Interesting. So, what were some of the defining moments that really influenced you and approach to towards finance today is?
My approach to finance today is so I see three areas in FP&A. Technology can transform the FP&A. The first is transform accurate workflow knowledge. For example, the reporting, right? So we have the daily sales report or monthly CFO report. They are very standard report, has a set of KPIs. We know where the data sit, we know how to prepare those analyses. Then the robotic automation process can play a pivot role to prepare those reports for us more efficiently. As soon as the data is ready, so the robot probably can start in midnight, right? So to have the report ready. So the second thing I see is how the AI RPA transformed the forecasting area. In the past, so we have the limited data input from either our CRM, for example, like Salesforce, or from the economic market data, or large supplier or large customers capex spending. So shape the overall broader scope of the economic indication in the performance. Then, together with internal data, so we prepare the driver-based forecast. But now with AI and the RPA or machine learning, so the data set could be coming from broader scope of resources. Then that means the AI can generate the outcome in the forecast. For FP&A, we need to understand the model behind those forecasts, therefore to monitor the accuracy, fine and tune the model input to make sure the AI or the AI generated forecast aligns with the reality. So that's the second part. The third thing I see is FP&A is going to be elevated even further. Today is already a business partnership role, but FP&A will be elevated further to be a superman in the business partnership because FP&A now will have a lot of data insights. So how FP&A will get the insights, business acumen from those insights to tell a good story or a bad story or to come up with a strategy to mitigate those risks or leverage more initiatives to capture those opportunities to boost the P&L. So FP&A's role is going to transform into a actually Superman in business partnership position.
Interesting. I think you mentioned it's going to be like a Superman helping humans, automate multiple tasks. I would love to understand and also to throw a perspective to our audience here. How has FP&A evolved since the start of your career? I'm sure it would have been manual and now it has been automated. Would love to understand and hear how you used to deal with these tasks from the start of your journey and
Mhm.
what has changed.
So FP&A at the start of my career, so it's in four categories. So the first one is a traditional reporting, monthly reporting, variance analysis to budget, forecast, or to last year. So that's the first part of my FP&A scope. The second is the forecasting and the budgeting and the short-term and the long-term planning, right? So those parts you work with the business to identify the drivers, the momentum of the external factors, and also the drivers within the internal business factors to prepare the forecast. The third one is ad hoc project finance. For example, you support the M&A in deal valuations, due diligence review. The fourth part is business partnership. At the beginning, before we have this AI technology, at the beginning, a lot of processes, especially in the reporting part and also in the project finance part, in the M&A or financial modeling part, are prepared in Excel, could be very manual. So with this technology, a lot of reporting part is automated through RPA, send out the report, prepare the report based on the rule you set in the robot. And then also when prepare the financial modeling, for example, like a cloud easily to give you a three-way statement very easily. You have the data input, you have the requirements, and then it can generate three-way statements instantly. So those things are transformed how we analyze our data, especially the method, how we analyze the data, which tools we use, and then to analyze those data. So to shift our focus on more analyzing or understanding the outcomes, understanding the data insights, and then using the data insights to partner with the business to tell the stories, to maximize the opportunities or mitigate the risks. So FP&A now is, like I said earlier, is shift away from reporting role to a more Superman in a business partnership role.
Excellent. Really insightful, Aaron. I think especially how you have navigated these transformation roles across different stages of your career. It's interesting to see how these experiences have shaped your perspective on finance transformation today. I'm sure it has given you a unique perspective and lens on driving change at a scale. Great to hear, Aaron. Thanks for that. So you have been a part of multiple transformation journeys. Would love to learn and know more about what are some of the most impactful initiatives that you have led and
Okay,
contributed
so
towards.
this is a very good question. I think, especially today, we have a lot of tools in the market. We have a lot of platform we can partner with or a lot of supplies we can partner with, right? So we can identify a lot of opportunities within organizations by leveraging RPA or intelligent process automation, IPA, or AI or machine learning, right? I think the focus we should always remember, we should always focus on business value-led initiatives. For example, if we try to do technology-led initiatives, we will shift because in the end, we are in a business world, we need to maximize the stakeholders' values, right? So the business value-led initiatives are very critical.
Absolutely.
That means if I receive the initiatives, I need to know how to prioritize them, right? So I need to identify the ones can generate the highest return on investment, right? So those initiatives will tackle the first. Also, when we understand the return, so what is return? Meaning what is in the value pool, so value pool. I see this will be four elements in the value pool. The first one is the automation, the AI can help the business boost the revenue. So revenue uplift is one of the elements in the value pool. The second one is real cost reduction because once the process getting more efficient, you will see the real cost reductions either from the T's, total employment cost, or from using less contractors work. So that's a real hard savings we can see in the P&L. The third is cost avoidance, meaning when your volumes go up, but you want to curve the cost line. So it's not going to be a linear. So then that means you can do more with the same, right? So the last one will be everyday automation. I see that as employees know how to use a tool so they can make their daily work more efficient. So those four elements in the value pool form with the return. Then you analyze the ROI. Then you prioritize the initiatives that can generate the highest return to your business. And the second thing I want to mention is we needed to find the initiatives which has the biggest impact, meaning can scale up, right? So especially for a lot of global organizations, and then we have operations across the world. So you need that initiatives have the scalability, so that will create the most impactful results to the business.
Amazing, amazing. I think having these transformations implemented at companies is no easy thing. It's a big challenge, and wanted to know what are the internal challenges did you encounter while implementing these kind of transformations at companies? Because I'm sure I'm working at one and implementing automation for firms is it's a painful task for me to explain how it can bring in success. And what challenges did you encounter while trying to explain to your internal teams?
So I think get stakeholders to align with you. So that's the first challenges you needed to solve. So a lot of time when people mention automation, it could have a negative perspective. Okay, automation linked to in efficiency improvement, meaning the total employment cost reduction. So that's a negative feelings to a lot of people, right? So then you have to shift the focus from technology-led conversation to a business value-led conversation. What that means is you when you identify initiatives that could impact on the business, you needed to engage the conversation as early as possible with your stakeholders to help them understand. So that initiatives has benefits to their P&L, has a benefit to the organizations. So then they can have a feeling of sense ownership and then of that initiative. The second thing is you needed to create very quick wins, meaning you will find that those initiatives can generate the highest value and with the lowest implementation complexity. So quick wins. So with those quick wins, you can gain momentum. So your stakeholders can see the real impact in their business and then they will become your advocate. The third one, I think communications are very important. So there are the communications I see that is depending on who your audience is. For example, if you communicate to executive leadership team, the message needs to be clear and then crispy. One or two messages, very focused. What's the RPA, IPA, AI gonna do for the broader enterprise? But when you communicate to the business leaders, so you communicate as what's this technology, this initiatives, what's this implementation of or rollout of this technology do with have an impact on the business is a revenue lift or its efficiency gains, message could be 4 to 5 messages. But when you communicate it to the task owners, needed to be more specific because that will change the way how they operate daily, right? So then you will go through the process discoveries with them, define the steps with them as to understand as is for now, this is process with the RPA technology and then as enablers to transform this initiative, this is a future status. So your role will be changing in the future status. So you will not work in silo anymore. You will partner with a robot and then to complete your task, either as a monitor role or as a complementary role to complete the task. So I see those are the 3 areas we needed to tackle before we roll out any technologies here.
Great. And how is the success measured? Do you all take collective decisions, or is there a point of contact assigned for a project like this, or is it like stakeholders getting together, discussing on certain collective things on what has scaled up and what has not? How is the success measured when you're
Yes.
implementing something like this?
The important part I see this is the success is measured how effectively we execute, right? For example, so I see this as a pot. I call it a pot. So in this pot, we have 4 functions. We have transformation leaders in this pot. We have data leaders in this pot. We have developers. Then we also have business leaders. So each area, those 4 areas, each area has its own accountability, right? So for example, finance, we needed to understand the ROI on the initiatives. So we needed to support the business to prioritize the initiatives. So we are the doorkeeper to make sure those initiatives can actually generate the value to the business. For the data and then developers, they focus on the technology side to make sure we have the right infrastructure, we have good cybersecurity, the process we are going to do, and then it's ready for the audit, right? So the lastly is the business. So business is accountable for the when we complete the initiative, business is accountable for ensuring these initiatives is correct. So it's generating the values to the business and then it's going to transform the way the business operates. So they are accountable for that. So we work together. So the success is measured on each part of those 4 functions execute the task successfully.
Really fascinating, Aaron. Thanks for that. Especially at the scale at which transformation needs to be driven in such environments, it really shows the critical alignment that is required between teams and systems to
Mhm.
become at that level. Executing it successfully is not an easy task and it can drive someone crazy. Thanks for that. And let's dive into our today's core theme, that is RPA in FP&A. Would love to learn and understand which RPA in FP&A processes are most suitable for automation, and where do you think teams underestimate
Mhm.
its potential?
So RPA has its pros and cons. So I will start from answering your question first. What process good for automation in FP&A? I see the standard reporting is good for RPA because it's rule based, is repetitive, the transaction volumes are heavy, so they are very good for RPA. For example, send out the P&L report or KPI dashboard or preparing the monthly management report. They are very good for RPA. But I also want to say is there are things we should not over automate because when you over automate things, you desensitize the information, right? So a lot of information, you need a human's interaction with your stakeholders to review them, to discuss, to align the business values, and then to mitigate the risks, right? So typical report, if that KPI or that report is a backbone of your business, then you cannot just rely on the robot send out the report and then think that's done and dusted, right? It's not the right way. You needed to have a human behind it or analyst behind it to review the report results with your stakeholders to understand what's those data telling you for your business financial health, right? So those things should not be automated. Also, I see this as if you know where to brake, like you drive a car, you know you have a brake and you can drive really fast because you know you can brake at some point. If you don't have a brake, then you are going to feel scared to drive faster, right? So that's why I think to know where should not be automated is also as important as to know where it should be automated.
Exactly. I think you hit the dart at the right spot. So you mentioned you shouldn't over automate. You should know when to draw the line. And so would like to know, how can teams prioritize what to automate first? I mean, how do they take that decisions on what to automate first? What should
Mm.
be my priority? And, this is the process that I need to automate and
Yes,
this will solve my
this is a
problems.
very good question about the prioritization of the initiatives, right? So I break down into four areas. So the first area is you have the highest benefit, the lowest complexity, then I call it the quick wins. Those things you definitely should do first, right? Because complexity is low, you can build a robot very quickly, and then you can generate the highest benefits. The second one I call it must do, meaning has the highest benefit, but also the complexity is high. So then those things you still gonna do it because it's generated the value for the business. The third one is you have the lowest benefits, but also lowest complexity. I call those as low-hanging fruit. The last one is I call it the long-term strategic value, meaning the lowest benefits have the highest complexity. So to prioritize those, you have to think what the channels you want to use to build those robotic automation process, right? So my view on this is if the complexity is low, meaning people, from operations or from functional teams, they can learn the technologies, know how to build the automations in today's world. We know there are so many courses you can learn, for example, UiPath or Microsoft, Power Automation tools, right? So even Google's so it has a lot of automation tools you can learn and use to help you boost your daily productivity. So those things, if the complexity is low and the benefits low, you can learn those tools to help you to do those tasks. But if the complexity is high, then you will need to experts to help you to build those automation solutions, right? So could it be your internal RPA team, internal developers, or can seek outside support, external consultants. So those four areas forms the way I think how automation or how to prioritize the automation initiatives, and then also which channels you should go through to implement those initiatives.
Really interesting. The way you navigated through this perspective is really interesting, which strikes me. One of the biggest concerns in a company is management. How do you get a buy-in from teams who feel threatened by automation, which might take their jobs away and might say, this is a robot that might erase my job and where humans are no longer needed?
It's a joint workforce, so it's not a one person's job and then to ensure message is clear. To start with, the conversation with the business or with the functional team so will be transformed from technology-led conversation to a business value-led conversation. So to understand the automations, implement this automation, what that means to your business, improve efficiencies, to reduce the cost. So those are you transform from just simply to say this is technology going to impact on your business performance. So this is first thing to shift the conversation to business value led conversation. Second is I think in today's world, enhance human capital's knowledge is so important because we shouldn't be doing the way we have been doing in the last 10, 20 years because now we have a lot of AI tools here. So how to use those AI tools or how to knowing of using those AI tools is important. So that's I think organizations learning development department carries the responsibility to enhance the human capital's knowledge capabilities of using those AI tools to help employees boost their daily activities. So you shift employees from doing the low value adding tasks. For example, in FP&A work is standard reporting, send out the P&L. to a more higher value added task. For example, like partnering with the business, digest the information to have the execution plans and then to mitigate those risks or maximize those opportunities you identified through those data insights.
Interesting. And how does this ultimately impact leadership decision making? Is there an automation around that also that might come in further, where to take strategic decisions, you might require a superhero or a superman that can help a company quicken things?
I should touch on 2 points here is, so from leadership perspectives, I think automation is a cultural shift. The mindset of the business need to be curious, need to be innovative. So we'll need to transform from the old way we operated to the new way, how to use the technology. So it's going to be a cultural shift. The second one you mentioned, the approval, I want to touch on is the governance. From the governance side, so I don't see governance as a obstacle to prevent you move faster through the automation or transformation. So I see because governance needs to be embedded in each steps. For example, when you conduct process discoveries, and then you will know who is a task owner is, who is a process holder is, and then you will know system administrator, and then what requirement to make sure the security of the system is safe when it's going to be accessed by the robot. And then you have layers of governance already embedded in each steps when you conduct the process discovery. So when you completed the process discovery, then you have a quick risk assessment, a go no go button, and plus the ROI. If I see things is only the unclear governance stop your automation. Strong governance doesn't stop your automation journey, right? So only the unclear governance slow down your automation journey. The second thing is you gotta know how to hear the governance as well. So for initiatives that have a lot of significant impact on the business, more complex, and then we definitely need a stronger governance to make sure things won't go wrong. But for
Absolutely.
light automation initiatives, then you can speed up the governance to make sure the initiatives pass through the ladders faster and quicker. So those two things I see are important in how we think about the governance. Also, from leadership perspective, it's a cultural shift when we talking about today's automations or AI.
Really interesting. I think it's clear teams are moving beyond just reporting numbers to actually driving insights. And it's influencing business decisions. It's a powerful change for businesses. Building on that, let's take a step further. Beyond RPA, how do you see AI over here reshaping the CFO's technology landscape? How would you differentiate between RPA analytics and AI
Yes.
in finance?
So RPA is robotic process automations. You needed to give the robot the rules, right? So AI is more intelligent. AI based on your data pattern, your trend, and then to decide. So what's the next step? And the analytics, of course, analytics is embedded in both functions. So in the CFO office, I see is those technologies going to transform the workflow knowledge. For example, the way we prepare the reports. Second is IC is going to transform how we do the forecast, budgeting, long-term range planning. So because now you have more data insights from different external resources, from S&P 500 or from IMF or from your suppliers or customers, CapEx spending or OpEx spending budget. So you have more and more data insights. So then you also have to understand those, not every data is true data. So the human has to behind it to say, okay, this needs to be plugged into the model. This should not be plugged into the model. The lastly is transform the finance role. So finance role will be from the traditional reporting, data processing role to a business partnering role because robot will start doing the low value adding activities for the business and the finance will be a true business partner to our operational leaders.
So, do you see AI over here replacing traditional forecasting methods, or people are going to stick to the same kind of methods that they are using for
I do
forecasting?
see AI will replace the traditional forecasting method. For example, traditional forecasting method could be based on the trend, could be based on the year evolutions, on your revenue, on your cost, or you can be more specific on the driver based. What's a critical KPIs, the volume, price, mix to drive the business. So those are very massive. This has a very clear mathematical behind it, right? So AI definitely will replace the tradition, the way how we prepare the forecast. But the human will need to make sure the forecast
Right.
accuracy is still there. So then when we have the actuals, we will need to understand what's the variance caused between the actual and the forecast and fine tune the models to make sure the forecast is more accurate through the period of the time. So definitely I see that's a trend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And see, automation is important. It's a must in today's world, today's finance tech world. So, what should a CFO be cautious about when one is trying to adopt an
Yes.
AI tool?
So I will go back to our initial conversation again. I think adopting the tool, we should not let the tool to dictate how we do our work. We should think about what's the business needs. So then we will think about the tool because tool eventually is going to be an enabler for the business to generate more values. So in the CFO office, I think we look at its status as today's world, like how we operate
Mhm.
as its status. Think about what the future status we want to let it to be. And then deep dive into the process, conduct the process discoveries, understand your pain points, define the roadmap, how to get to future status. And in the roadmap, then identify the tools to help you to get to the future status. Then the tools, technology will come into play a role in defining which tools we should be adopting or use.
That's really insightful, Aaron. It feels like we are just getting started with what AI can do in finance, right? There's so much potential beyond efficiency, especially how teams are generating insights and how they are driving strategy in today's world. It's clear there's a shift from automation to intelligence that's happening here. A fundamental change in how finance teams are operating.
Yes.
Like
When
to
you
say something?
mentioned the efficiency, right? So I also want to say is IPN has a very important role when we sense a signal in a business, how quickly we can understand that signal, using the data to analyze that signal to generate an outcome or advice to the executives. So that the time period is so important to IPNA. So with the technology, we want to shorten the turnaround time in IPNA. When we sense a signal, we want to take the shortest time to generated the insights of what that signals means to the business. So AI RPA can definitely enable us to shorten this time.
Great. That was really interesting and fascinating to know. I'm just going to close on today's episode. So before we go ahead and do that, would like to seek your advice for our audience. So what advice would you give to finance and tech professional who is looking
I think definitely the knowledge, I see knowledge is a power. So the more you know about this technology, the more you will feel more comfortable with the change. So never stop learning. So that's the first advice. Second is to shift your mindset to focus on business partnering. So eventually finance role going to be transformed from processing data driven role or reporting role to a more senior, like I said, a Superman role in business partnering.
and how can someone transition from a traditional finance role into a more tech enabled that probably involves in leading a career into implementing automation, getting involved into the decision making and learning more about how to
Yeah.
streamline things, right? So how can someone transition from a traditional one to a more
Yes.
tech enabled
First
one?
is to understand the skill sets, be aware of what's happening around you. So knowing what's the latest technology, what's the latest tools out there. And then second is to understand your current skill sets. So then, like I said, the as is status, and then also the future status, depending on where you want to be, right? So then understand the two phases and then to define a roadmap for yourself as well to get to the future status of your career to be a Superman in business partnership role. So how can I get there to learn a tool, to know how to automate your daily tasks to be more efficient, and then to know there are so many data IPNA can access to, how to create the clarity among those complex data sets, right? So those take time. But don't say no to many opportunities. That's my advice as well.
So is there something out of the box that you would like to advise world?
Yes, exactly. So I think to embrace the opportunities in the technology evolution happening right now, so it's definitely a great start.
It's interesting to see how finance teams are moving away from data gathering to actually driving forward looking insights. It's no longer just about reporting what happened, but about predicting what's next, and it's influencing outcomes, like you mentioned. And that's where finance teams are truly acting as strategic partners
Yes.
to the business and to the stakeholders and decision making. So, Aaron, this has been a fantastic conversation, a lot of practical insights on how FP&A is evolving with automation and AI. It's been great to dive into your journey, learn about your experience leading finance transformation at scale and your perspectives on RPA in FP&A and how it's evolving in the role of AI in the CFO's office. Some incredible, valuable takeaways that you have left out there for our audience and finance leaders navigating in this space today. Thanks so much, and it was great having you on our
Thank you so much.
podcast.